We wanted the best school district that we could find. We were looking for fields nearby and parks nearby because the kids love to play, and the whole neighborhood thing. We became part of the whole experience early on. I started to hit an age where you need to do things like get physicals. So I go into the doctor's office, I take their physical, I pass everything. They give me an EKG, I pass it. But the doctor calls me and he says, listen, I have an issue here. We need to explore this a little further. I'm like, why? I passed the test, right? Why do I have to do more? He said, no. He said, you need to. So he coaxes me to see a cardiologist, which I fought. But I went, and I eventually saw the cardiologist. He put me through even more strenuous tests, a stress test, actually. And I went through that. I passed. But he said, I still have issues. There's something going on here that I'm not comfortable with. So, I fought that for a while. But then he finally got me into a surgeon's office. They did this, they call it a heart cath, where they literally run a fiber through your vein into your heart, and you can actually see the blood pumping. And what they found was, in spite of all of my resistance, that 5 of my 6 coronary arteries were ridiculously clogged. 2 were over 95, 2 were over 85, 1 was over 75, and a week later they had me in for quintuple bypass surgery. I didn't even know such a thing existed. Sometimes you can be just arrogantly stupid, because I should have been listening to these guys 6 months earlier, and I didn't. And I thought I knew more than they did because I'm a smart guy, right? But sometimes you can be smart and not smart at the same time. There are some things that you just don't mess with, and one of those would be your heart. Minimum standards mean absolutely nothing. They meant nothing to the professionals that were really there to save my life. And I thank goodness that these folks saw beyond we met minimum standards, because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. I'm doing my physical therapy for the heart surgery, which means I'm out walking in the neighborhood every day, which is kind of fun, because my wife and I go out and we walk and we see people that we know and we wave, we say hello. Well, one day we're doing this and a woman flags me down, and she's a woman, I had coached her son before, and her dad was actually a coach as well, good folks. She said, wait, I got to talk to you. And I thought she was going to talk to me about, my heart thing, right? But she says, we talked about that momentarily, but she says, I got to talk to you about pipelines. I will be the first to admit, my eyes rolled. If they didn't roll physically, they were rolling mentally. I was like, pipelines. I just started heart surgery. But she says, this is a bad thing that's coming into our neighborhood. I'm like, I'm thinking, how bad is it? We've wanted gas cooking forever since we moved here, and we've lived here, at this point, pushing 30 years. She said, no, it's not about that. It's not that. You're not getting gas cooking. And I'm like, well, if it helps everybody, and it's just kind of an annoyance to me, I'm okay with that. I'll take that one for the team, right? She says, no, you really need to listen. This stuff wasn't impacting one single person in Uwchlan Township in a positive way. It was just going through Uwchlan Township and making a stop at Marcus Hook. And at that point, it was getting loaded onto ships and being sent across the ocean. And I'm thinking, I'm not a lawyer, but sort of this concept of eminent domain's going through my head. And like, how is that eminent domain? So it's kind of irking, but I'm still not on board yet. Then she said, the other thing that you have to take into account is the contents of this. I told you it wasn't natural gas, but I haven't told you the whole story yet. So she starts to explain to me what is actually happening. And the two things that just, I couldn't believe. I thought maybe she was exaggerating, making things up. But one, it's this combination of butane, ethane, and propane that's liquefied, frozen liquefied, pushed through a pipeline. And when it turns back into gas, it's heavier than air, and it's outrageously combustible. And again, I'm not a scientist, But I know a little bit about physics, and as I think about this, I think this is an outrageously just dangerous combination of things. It's heavier than air, so it just won't, dissipate, and it's highly combustible, which means as it comes out, it kind of flows and looks for an ignition source. Like that, and then I'm like, nah, nobody could have proved this. No. And she goes, no, this is coming. So some light bulbs went off in my head, and the township was holding a meeting in a couple of weeks, and I went to my first one of these meetings, and I just stayed in the back because I still wasn't ready to do anything except, I was good that I could get out and attend the meeting. But people got up and they told their personal stories, and that included a special services guy, the former special services guy from the Army. There was a research scientist who's a neighbor of mine, lives just down the block from me. There were people that I knew that got up and were crying, and they were telling this story of not only the dangers, but the frustration that they were experiencing as they were trying to get people to listen. And the only people that seemed to be paying attention at that point were the people that were just on the actual easement itself. I got kind of outraged by this whole thing. I just couldn't believe it. It felt to me like this was the most irresponsible thing that I'd ever seen a government do. So I was paying attention to it, and it looked like it wasn't a sure thing yet necessarily. I saw an article in the paper that I think it was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, the local Supreme Court had come out with a ruling against fracking, and I'm thinking, this thing's going to go away, but it didn't. There was a leak in Morgantown. It happened in April of this year, 2017. This thing is going past schools. It's going past, businesses. It's going past the mall. So whether you live, in the easement and you already knew about it, or you live 2 miles away from the easement, if you're sending your kid to school, all of a sudden, you're not immune. As much as we're fighting the fact that there's, this big pipeline, actually 2 of them that are being planned to be planted in our backyards, there's more to come. I don't care what the minimum government standards are. The minimum government standards don't necessarily ensure public safety. I don't think that they were meant to address pipelines that were going, hundreds of feet from a school. It's not enough for me. There's some things that you can't patch.